Welcome back, YouTube. Today's question comes from Instagram from Sylvester Harris 1286, who's asking, what is the best training split to start after a 6-month lockdown? So like most questions and topics, there are always going to be a lot of it depends factors to consider. But instead of circling around that, I'm going to give you some of the key principles you should consider when it comes to choosing the right training split to get you back into training after a long layoff. As always, I'm going to drop some timestamps down below into the pinned comment section and the description box. And I'm also going to separate the progress bar here for you so you can jump ahead if you're impatient and want to just see my recommendation. Or you can also use it to easily go back and forth for referencing later. But if you want to get a complete understanding on how and why I put things together the way that I do, I'd recommend watching this all the way through. It also really helps the old YouTube algorithm if you watch this video all the way through, which helps this channel grow, which means I can keep pumping out all sorts of free content for you guys. And while we're talking about channel growth and free content, please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, as that too makes a very big difference to support the continual creation of content here. Alright, so with all that out of the way, let's get into it. Now, this won't be the perfect recommendation for all of you, as of course, all of you watching or listening to this will have vastly different experience levels and goals, and also will have had very different amounts of training occurring whilst in a lockdown period. Some of you might not have done any resistance-based exercise whatsoever for months on end in lockdown, whilst others would have done some sort of training. But even still, who's to say that that training was doing anything meaningful or productive from a muscle or strength building perspective? Or whether it was more just exercise for the sake of exercise, which itself is not necessarily a bad thing, as it still can provide a lot of mental benefits too, which shouldn't be understated. But what are the principles that we should all be using to guide decision making around choosing the best training split to get stuck back into things after a long period of time off? Well, the main thing that I'm going off here is that returning back to the gym after a period of time off or lockdown is going to entail two things. First is that you're definitely going to have a change in the stimulus that you're placing upon your body. So even if you have been able to train, and even if you have been following some very productive home-based workouts, perhaps like what I put up on here on YouTube, or on my Instagram, or on my website or app, it's pretty safe to assume that it's going to be considerably different to what you're going to do when you return back to a typical gym environment. So this change in stress is going to bring with it a lot more, weight than usual. What I mean by this is, while normally you could do, say, 10 sets in the gym on any given exercise or body parts, and that might not necessarily be considered a humongous training stress, because it's a change in the stimulus now, those 10 sets could be enough for it to be the equivalent of, say, 15 or 20 sets in any other context. Because while the muscles themselves may still receive a similar amount of stimulation, you could argue that the nervous system receives more, as it's a new stimulus all over again. And in my opinion, that's significant. We should always be looking at prioritizing the nervous system above all, even outside of getting back into training after a long period of time off, because the nervous system is what dictates everything else in the body. It will decide how easily you're able to recruit your muscle fibers to then place them under tension for growth, how much strength you're able to express in any exercise, and how much mobility or range of motion your body will have access to at any given period in any given movement. So as such, if you throw everything and the kitchen sink at your body when you get right back into training in the gym because you're so excited to get back to it, you'll probably wind up creating a lot of excessive stress responses that aren't going to bring with them an equivalent increase in strength, muscular size, or mobility because we've overstrained the nervous system. It's such common sense, but I think it is overlooked by many. And with so many people around the world already having gone back to the gym, and from hearing their negative experiences from going in with no real plan and a little bit too much excitement, it is definitely worth addressing and bringing up here. So the next thing to think about is that you're essentially starting out as a newbie all over again with respect to a lot of the skills that are associated with lifting. Whether you've lost a lot of muscle mass and strength or not much whatsoever, having an extended period of time off away from the gym stimulus will bring with it this deconditioning of the skill of lifting weights. So if we look at it in that context, what should our primary goal be? It should be to set up a training split in a way that improves skill acquisition as quickly as possible. In the same way that you'd learn any skill, whether it's a physical skill such as playing a musical instrument or a lifting technique, or more of a mental skill such as learning a language or studying biochemistry, the thing that is most important to improve rates of learning and skill acquisition is going to come down to frequency. Volume is, of course, very important, but if we look at it from a neural plasticity perspective, let's say we're trying to learn like a musical instrument, sitting there and bashing away at the same passage over and 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 over again for hours on end will yield some kind of result, but usually it's better to spend a short, dedicated, focused amount of time on it and then go away and leave it for a while. This going away and leaving it for a while period is actually very important, as your brain is still going to be elaborating on the work you did and is forming new connections or reinforcing old connections between the nerve cells required to pick up that skill. If you push it too hard in one hit, there is an overstimulation and fatigue that occurs, which creates not just a decreased response from a learning perspective, but it could also cause you to ingrain bad habits and bad patterns to compensate if you were to keep beating down upon that dead horse. Now again, this is pretty common sense when you think about it. It's like if you're in the gym, you're doing an exercise and you push it to a fatigue point of say 10 reps, then you keep pushing for another 10 reps. You all know that if you hit that true fatigue point at 10 reps, the next 10 reps are going to be very different as your body starts to compensate and cheat. And you all know that you'd be far better off taking some time to rest, even if it's just a couple of minutes, than coming back and repeating it again. That way, you get to bring not just a fresher muscle, but a fresher nervous system to the equation to get more out of that next set. So, with all this in mind, what kind of training split would give you the best opportunity to take all of this into account, with the primary goal being skill acquisition and higher frequencies? I would go towards something that trended towards a full body or a blended body part split. We want something probably low volume with potentially shorter session times in general and a higher training frequency to give your body as many opportunities as it can to approach the training sessions with as much freshness as possible to rebuild yourself back to your baseline. Now, it could be argued either way that this is good or bad for building muscle or strength, but the reality is that's not what the goal is right now. The goal is to simply regain the skill of lifting again and to condition your body back to its previous spot before lockdowns or the forced time off that you might have had. So I'd be avoiding a lot of failure and overload techniques and keeping a lot of reps and sets in reserve or in the tank. I'd also generally try to keep the session duration short and add in a wide variety of exercises that you've done in the past to give your body as much of an ability to regain and reinforce its previous control and coordination on those exercises. So all we need is some sort of methodical way to lay this all out. So I'm going to give you a sample here that you may want to play with. So let's say we're doing a 4-day full body split. It might look something like 2 upper body emphasized full body days and 2 lower body emphasized full body days. Of the upper body days, we can have one that emphasizes more horizontal patterns and one that goes for more vertical patterns. Or to collectively group it as muscle groups, we could say full body 1 could be sequenced as chest, upper back, rear delts, and then accessorized with maybe some lats, some middle delts, and some arms and a couple of leg exercises that will cover the bases of quads, glutes, and hamstrings and adductors. And then for day 2, we could go for lats and shoulders and accessorize it with chest, upper back, and arms, and a couple of leg-based exercises again. Then for the 2 lower body emphasized full body days, we could then go with one day that focuses more on knee flexion or quads, and the other one focused more on hip flexion or the posterior chain. So day one could be something along the lines of a couple of quad exercises first, then some accessories for the hamstrings and glutes and adductors, and finishing off with some upper body exercises. And day two would be reversed, starting off with posterior chain movements and moving on to quads and finishing off with upper body. So this layout allows you to give each body part its own priority day, as whatever you do first in a workout will typically receive the most stimulus. But you're also able to get a complete stimulus on your entire body through the rest of the workout. Now, of course, you can prioritize body parts however you want by devoting more volume to certain body parts or movements that you need for your goals or for your sport or for whatever that you want. But it's really up to you. Now, I'm not going to go into the complexities of exercise selection and what you should or shouldn't choose and order in the different programs. That's a whole much deeper, long conversation, but the best advice I can give is to use common sense. I'm sure many of you will know the exercise that you enjoy and are familiar with, so bring them back in and fit them in wherever it makes sense. You can, of course, jump over to my exercise series here on YouTube, or if you want to see how I lay a lot of these things out, you can also take a look on my website and app where I have full body programming and workout walkthroughs available for you to just watch along and see what I've done in the past with full body programs. One thing I do want to mention though is that I'd recommend having no more than 2 exercises per region per workout, as the frequency will catch up to you very quickly. If you were to do, say, 2 exercises each day, and do an average of, let's say, 3 sets per exercise, that's bringing your weekly volume up for that body part very quickly to a total of around 20 to 24 sets across the 4 workouts, which is very significant. So in most cases, 1 exercise will be enough. It doesn't sound like much, but across the week, that's 4 separate exercises you get to use to expose your muscles and nervous system to use as an opportunity to regain that skill acquisition. Remember, frequency is more important than total volume right now, and we don't want to overdo it and get fatigued, as that will further delay the skill acquisition process, and it may even set you up for injuries if you go too hard too soon. And nothing would be more frustrating than spending months in isolation lockdowns and not being able to train properly, only to injure yourself within your first month back to the gym and having to take even more time off. All right, so that's looking at a 4-day split. What if you wanted to do more days or less days, which is completely up to you. And you could get away with doing every day if you want to when you're getting back into this kind of thing. The simplest option would be to simply alternate and space these days out even more if you're doing less. For convenience, let's call these workouts A, B, C, and D. So for a 2-day split, I would do workouts A and B on week 1 and C and D on week 2. Then I've returned to workouts A and B on week 3, and so on. And if you're doing 3 days, you would do the same. You would do workouts A, B, C on week 1, then you'd do workouts D, A, B on week 2, then C, D, A on week 3, and continue just like that. And if you want to go to, say, 5 days, you could then just go to A, B, C, D, and then back to A on week 1, and then on week 2, roll over to B, C, D, A, B, and continue like that. Since the workouts are all full body, it doesn't actually matter as much on the spread of the workouts, as even with the different emphasis on different body parts on different days, you can still rest assured that you're going to be covering your bases from a skill acquisition standpoint by exposing your muscles and joints to typical training again. From there, you can simply look to increase your intensity and volumes over time, and you will start to get to a point where necessity dictates that you have to start spreading things out a little bit more, as it'll become hard to push with the same intensity for a high number of exercises and sets and volumes using the exact same split. So you'll organically feel this need to change in time. But for all intents and purposes, there's no reason why you couldn't start out on, say, a 3-day spread, as I mentioned, and then go up to maybe 4 days and then 5 days. That would be a very simple and logical way to program for, say, 3 to 6 months worth of full body programming. The choice really is yours, but that's a really good starting template that you can use to start to think more about how to get back into training after an extended period of time off. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video useful and interesting and helpful. If you have any questions at all, please do drop them into the comment section below, and I'll see all of you guys next time.